Tokia yanaleo, miyan kekansan, miwilipana esona Toki Pona. Hey everyone, I'm Greg Dan 3, and today I'm going to be teaching another lesson about Toki Pona. Today, it's going to be on the particle o and everything it does to a sentence. There's going to be a lot more in there. In fact, we have a lot of words today, so let's get started. So first, let me introduce our particles. So we have the particle o, and it is spelled o, and it's drawn with the little letter O, or maybe a tiny circle, and a line directly over it, kind of like an exclamation point. And its purpose is to replace li in a sentence, turning the sentence into an instruction, command, or requirement. We'll dig into what that means as we get into the exercises for this lesson. But most importantly, it takes the place of li in a sentence. Then we have Tasso. T-A-S-O. It's drawn with one vertical line, and then on the left side, a small horizontal line. And Tasso is both a particle and a content word. As a particle, it goes at the beginning of a sentence, and its behavior is to connect one sentence to another with clarifying or contrary information. Again, we'll get to what that means later on. It also can be used as a modifier, and if it does appear as a modifier, it's generally the last modifier in order. And let's get to our proper content words for the lesson. We have tawa, drawn with a pair of legs facing to the right. It's similar to kama, but kama has the legs facing to the left. That's spelled T-A-W-A, and tawa has to do with motion, anything in motion. Next, we have utala, U-T-A-L-A. Utala is drawn with a pair of crossed swords. You can see the sort of handle part at the bottom of either one. And utala has to do with competition or battle. It could be a battle as in part of an actual war, or it could be a chess competition. Next, we have weka. Weka is drawn with 4 lines at every diagonal pointing out. And it is spelled W-E-K-A. Weka. Weka has to do with things being away or removed. Something can be at a faraway place, or it can be removed from a given location. Next, we have sitelen. And this one will look very familiar because it's actually drawn with lipu, the taller than it is wide square, and then with 3 dots in the center to indicate some kind of writing. It's spelled S-I-T-E-L-E-N, sitelen, and sitelen has to do with art, writing systems, drawing. Next, we have moli. Moli is drawn with a circle with 2 X's on the inside, about where eyes would go on a face. That's spelled M-O-L-I. And moli has to do with death, dying, killing. Next, we have tomo. That's T-O-M-O. And tomo is drawn with this house-shaped structure. You can see kind of separately the rooms of the house and the roof of the house, where the top part of the square is instead pointed upward like a triangle. Tomo has to do with house structures, buildings, rooms, any sort of place where you might live semi-permanently, right? Next, we have poki. P-O-K-I. Poki is drawn with another square taller than it is wide, but the top part of it is open. And Poki is any kind of container. It could be a bag or a wallet, just as well as it could be a plastic bin, a box, any sort of container, something meant to hold other things. As a matter of fact, you could think of a tomo as a kind of Poki. That's not something we're going to get into during this lesson, but it is fun to think about. Next, we have palisa. P-A-L-I-S-A. Palisa. Palisa is drawn with this thin, long rod or stick. And that is exactly the meaning of palisa, something that is long, relatively thin, and stick-like. You could think of an actual metal rod like you might hang your clothes on, or the branches of a tree. Next, we have Kili, K-I-L-I. It's drawn with a representation of an apple, and Kili is any kind of fruit or vegetable. It could be just as well an apple, grape, or banana as lettuce or carrot. Then we have pan, drawn with these three little arrows pointing down. That's spelled P-A-N. Pan has to do with bread, wheat, pasta, or carbs in general. You could think of it, and for that matter, a lot of Kili as well, as being similar to moku. We have 5 more, but don't worry, there are a lot of words here, but these ones will be much easier to remember because they'll be in a big collection. Here we have soweli, S-O-W-E-L-I. Soweli is drawn with an abstract representation of an animal. Now, this one actually took me a long time to get quite right, I have to admit, even though it is a relatively simple glyph. What you have to worry about is this curve along the top, then the first leg, 3 more legs, and then dot the eyes. Soweli is any sort of mammal, something you might see walking along the ground, often having fur. You could very generally say animal. Next, we have waso. W-A-S-O. And it's drawn a little bit similar to soweli, but in this case, the front of it, to the right, pokes out into a triangular shape and then comes back to form the body. And then again, you dot the eyes. And waso has to do with all sorts of flying animals. It includes both birds and bats. Next, we have akesi. A-K-E-S-I. Akesi has to do with all reptiles and amphibians, and it's drawn with, again, an abstract representation of a reptile. Something worth mentioning is that sometimes you'll see this drawn with 4 legs instead of the 6 you see here. Something like this. Both of those are akesi. Next, we have pipi. That's P-I-P-I. And pipi is drawn very similarly to akesi, but instead of a big circular body, it has just a line down the center. Pipi has to do with bugs, insects, spiders, any sort of creepy crawly thing that is quite that small. All right, and then we have one more word, and that is kala. K-A-L-A. Kala has to do with aquatic animals of any kind. It could be fish, it could be dolphins, it could be whales. Things that generally live their entire lives in the water. Something to note is that, unlike the others, kala is generally not drawn with eyes, but it is totally okay to add them. There, look at our little friend. Now, I refer to these words collectively as the critter words. This is the paradigm that Toki Pona uses to refer to living things besides yan. Let's get to the actual lesson content. So like I said, we're going to be looking at a sentence involving the word o, and many of them for that matter. So generally, o replaces li in a sentence. You can also give instructions without a subject, and that's how you most commonly see it. So let's say we have the sentence, o lukin e kulupu kasi. O lukin e kulupu kasi. Now let's take a moment and think about where our parts of speech are, right? Now I said that o replaces li. So that means this right here is where the predicate begins. You can see the head is lukin for the predicate. Then we have e, so everything here, kulupu kasi, is our object. Most notably, there is no subject here. And that's a standard behavior for the way o works. Generally, if there is no subject given for an o sentence, it means it's directed at the listener. And you can think of that like in English. If I say, let's translate this, o lukin e kulupu kasi. How about look at the garden or look at all the trees, right? You can hear in that sentence, there's no particular subject given. It's an instruction that goes out to whoever happens to be listening. You can also give instructions to a specific subject. So it's totally okay to directly replace li with o in a normal sentence, and that would turn it into an instruction or command. So let's say, Yan lili o musi nasa ala. Yan lili o musi nasa ala. Now, let's look again at our parts of speech. Like I said, this is an o that has a subject, and that's right here before o. It takes the exact place of li. O does. Then we have our predicate, musi nasa ala. So what does this sentence mean? Well, when you give an instruction to a particular subject, if your subject is not listening or not able to listen, this is something of a requirement, something that has to happen, but there's nobody in particular to act on it. If that subject is listening, then you would say it's still a command the same as before. And so the subject at the front gets their attention. So this is an instruction directed at Yan Lili, and it says musi nasa ala. So interpretation-wise, you would say, Yan Lili o musi nasa ala. This could be something like, child, stop being silly. Or it could be, the child must stop being silly. Again, that is dependent on whether you have the listener actually listening, right? So if you can give instructions to a listener that isn't listening, and it comes across as a kind of requirement, what happens if you give an instruction to an inanimate object? You could say, lipu o pakala ala. And this would be something like, given our subject is lipu, so papers or documents, some kind of command, pakala ala, do not destroy, must not be destroyed, right? We're directing a command at lipu, and here there are two possible meanings, one more clear than the other. It could be, the documents must not destroy, as if the lipu could destroy things. And it could be, the documents must not be destroyed, must be pakala ala. To distinguish these, you can restate. You could say, o pakala ala e lipu. So if somebody is there to act on it, you can say, o pakala ala e lipu. Remember that in the first sentence, there are two meanings. The lipu must not destroy and must not be destroyed. The new sentence is clear that the lipu must not be destroyed by the listener. Here, we are saying some actor, some listening actor, our implied subject, has to do this, which is to say, not destroy the documents. One more quick note before we go on to the next way you can use o. So let's say we have a sentence as simple as o ni. Do this. Just an instruction to do something in particular, right? In English, if I were to say, do this, I'm playing with it a bit using my tone, but there is an implied rudeness in English that isn't necessarily there in Toki Pona. In Toki Pona, if you give an instruction to somebody, it is essentially equally as polite as saying, hey, can you please do this? Now, you can still be rude in Toki Pona, but you have to be more intentional about it. And I hope you would like to not be rude in Toki Pona. Let's go on to the next use of o. Let's say we have the sentence, or rather the phrase, mama o. In this case, where we don't have a complete sentence, this is just a subject, and when o is used this way, it's used to get the attention of that subject. You can interject this around the statements you're saying in order to specify who those statements are directed at. And this can be pieces of information or other commands. Let's look at a more specific example. Yan sona o sina pona. Yan sona o sina pona. So we can see here that yan sona o looks like it might be the start of a sentence, right? But sina pona is already a complete sentence. So really, yan sona o is an interjection, getting the attention of yan sona. And then we tell that person, we tell yan sona, sina pona. So interpretation-wise, this would be something like, hey teacher, you're fantastic. It's worth mentioning that it's totally okay to have this interjection both before and after other statements. So you could have it afterward as well. So you could say, sina pona, yan sona o. And again, this part, yan sona o, is an interjection. We'll learn more about those in the next lesson, but suffice to say, this is not part of the sentence. It stands on its own and is, of course, related to these pieces of information by their nearness, but it's not part of this sentence, sina pona. Now, since you can do this, you could say, yan ale o pana e lipu sina. Yan aleo o pana e lipu sina. Yan aleo gets the attention of all the people, yan ale, and then we give them an instruction. And so we've kind of implicitly turned them into the listener by getting their attention. O pana e lipu sina. Turn in your papers. Give all your documents. And of course, once again, you can put this after the sentence. That is also perfectly fine. And then there's one more note, which is that you can also drop one of these O's and then just have a complete sentence with yan ale as the subject. You don't necessarily have to interject to get somebody's attention when the subject and then the rest of the sentence can get their attention just as well. So you could say yan ale o pana e lipu sina. Let's move on to Tasso. So Tasso is an interesting one. Let's say we have the sentence, mi kute e pakala Tasso mi pona. Mi kute e pakala Tasso mi pona. So these are two separate sentences, and here I've indicated that with a period. You could also use an interpunct, for example. Either way, you have two separate sentences, mi kute e pakala, and then Tasso mi pona. Tasso introduces a sentence, or rather, goes before a following sentence, and it provides clarifying or contrary information about a previous sentence. So here, interpretation-wise, you would say, I heard something break, mi kute e pakala. But I'm okay. Tasso mi pona. And you can see why that is specifically clarifying or contrary information. Because you can imagine, if you do hear something break, others around you might be worried that something happened, that you were not okay. And so you clarify, oh, hey, actually, I'm all right. Tasso, in short, works like but or however in English. If we were to imagine this second sentence without tasso, we would hear mi kute e pakala and then the statement mi pona. And while this can provide just as much information, there's a little bit of clarity lost because it's not as clear that the second sentence is providing this information about the first sentence, about what happened in the first sentence. Let's look at tasso as a modifier. Kute li pona e sona sina. Kute li pona e sona sina. So I mentioned before that tasso can be a modifier, but when it is a modifier, it generally goes at the end of a phrase. Tasso is kind of a weird one, and it's not the only one in Toki Pona's lexicon that behaves this way. It can be used in other parts as a modifier normally, but generally it does go at the end of a phrase. So let's look at what happens when we insert tasso into each phrase of this sentence. If we say, kute tasso li pona e sona sina. That will be something like, only listening will improve your understanding. Listening is the only thing that will improve your understanding. It makes the subject exclusive. What if we put it after pona? Ignore this tasso. We say, kute li pona tasso e sona sina. Well, in this case, now listening will do nothing but improve your understanding. The only thing that listening can do is improve your understanding. And then finally, kute li pona e sona sina tasso. That will be something like, listening will improve only your understanding. The understanding is the thing that's exclusive. So when tasso is applied to a phrase of a sentence, it makes that phrase of the sentence exclusive. It makes it the only property that applies. One more case for tasso, in which you can actually use it as a head of a phrase. Now, this is relatively rare, doesn't come up all too much, but it doesn't come up none. Tasso is a content word just as well as anything else. Tasso li pona. Tasso li pona. So when tasso is the subject here, as we can see, goes right before li. When it is a subject, it refers to the idea of something being exclusive or only. You could interpret this kind of generally. Onlyness is good. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So what about concepts that fit into the idea of something being only? You could say loneliness or being alone is good. Ideas that are involved in exclusivity or being only. In a similar case, we could say ona li kama tasso. Now, it's worth mentioning that there's actually two possible interpretations here. We're worried about tasso being used as a head here, and so kama is a pre-predicate. And interpreting it that way, it would be they become only. Okay, what kind of only? Maybe they become alone. Again, this one's a rarer case. It does come up, but it is a rarer case. Let me hurry through some sentences. Let's say we have o utala ala e soweli. O utala ala e soweli. So let's say that you are on a camping trip in the hills of a huge mountain range, and there's a ranger there with you to help you on the trip and provide knowledge of nature. You get back to your camp one night right before sunset, and you find a bear digging through your food. Oh no, you've got to stop the bear, right? But the ranger tells you, in a hushed but very serious tone, O utala ala e soweli. Don't fight the bear. Don't even try. And you can imagine the critical importance of that knowledge. Because if you run out of food, well, you can leave. You can go home. You're not going to go home if a bear gets you. O utala ala e soweli. Do not fight the bear. Let's say we have the sentence O poki ala e waso. O poki ala e waso. Let's say your neighbor somehow caught a bird from outside. Yeah. And they put it in a box and they're planning to keep the poor bird. Oh no. Well, you explain to them that birds want to fly and be free. And you tell them, O poki ala e waso. Don't put the bird in a container. Don't box in the bird. Fun little note about poki there. Though poki can be a location, you can also use poki in the predicate to say you put something into a container. Here, we're saying don't do that. Let's say we have the sentence, Palisa o yaki ala e tomo. Palisa o yaki ala e tomo. And then, separately, o weka e palisa. Let's say your parent has left you at home while they're running errands, They want you to clean the house because you made a big mess of the place not all that long ago, bringing in a bunch of branches from outside. Maybe you wanted to, I don't know, build a fort. But your parent says to you, palisa o yaki ala e tomo, o weka e palisa. So this first sentence is an instruction to palisa. Okay, well the palisa can't take an action, so this is a requirement, right? Palisa o yaki ala e tomo. The house must not become gross because of the sticks. Now, I'm playing with it a bit in English because this is a sentence that doesn't work as well in English as it does in Toki Pona. But the idea is that there's a requirement here that the sticks cannot make the house gross in any way. The sticks must not gross the house. And then the second sentence is an instruction to the listener. You can see that there's no subject. O weka e palisa. Weka being remove. Remove all the sticks. Get rid of them. Get them out of here. Let's say we have O moku e kili akasi lili o. O moku e kili akasi lili o. So your pet lizard absolutely loves to eat lettuce, tearing right into it. You wanted to show it off to some of your friends because you thought it was so cool to watch him eat, right? But it seems like your little lizard friend has stage fright. He won't eat in front of the crowd. So you tell him gently, O moku e kili akasi lili o. Please eat the lettuce. Little lizard, please eat the lettuce. Let's say we have the sentence. Suno li pona. Tasso pimea li pona e ken sitelen mi. Suno li pona. Tasso pimea li pona e ken sitelen mi. And that's kind of a long one. Let's break it down. We have suno li pona. The light is good, but pimea li pona e ken sitelen mi. So darkness improves e ken sitelen mi. Ken is abilities or permissions, so ability of writing, that is mine. Let's think of a context. Let's say you're discussing hobbies with a friend, especially when you like to work on your hobbies. Your friend is a morning person and loves feeling the sun as they're productive. You like the sun, but you prefer to work in the dark when the moon is out. So you tell them, Suno li pona, tasso pimea li pona e ken sitelen mi. The sun is great, but the darkness really improves my writing ability. We say, mi waso ala. Tasso mi ken tawa sewi. Mi waso ala, tasso mi ken tawa sewi. Let's say you are a genius inventor working on an amazing new tool, a working pair of wings that you can strap to your back. So when you come up with a working prototype, you demonstrate the invention in front of a crowd, explaining, mi waso ala, tasso mi ken tawa sewi. I am not a bird, but I can fly. And you can see all the little parts here. Mi, subject, waso ala, predicate, not a bird. Tasso, next sentence is contrary or clarifying. Mi ken tawa sewi. Subject, mi, ken, pre-predicate, tawa sewi. Some kind of up movement, right? And then we have one last one. Ala li pona tasso. Ala li pona tasso. Let's say your friend has become quite philosophical as of late and has been throwing out various statements in their new philosophical views for you to think about. The most recent one seems maybe a little obvious to you, but you don't let them know that. The statement is, ala li pona tasso. No things are exclusively good. Now, there's a trick here, which is that there's actually two interpretations. There's no things are exclusively good, as in there don't exist any things that are exclusively good, or there is nothingness is only good. Maybe your friend is smarter than you thought. All right, let's do the roundup. First off, you have commands in Toki Pona. They can be used to provide specific instructions to a person, get somebody's attention, or set out requirements if you happen to have something that needs to be done and you're just expressing it maybe as a list of rules, right? Then you have the word Tasso. Tasso can be used to connect two separate sentences with clarifying or contrary information using Tasso on the beginning of the second sentence. That's a bit of an extension of our grammar. And the last important note is Toki Pona is polite by default. That is, if you make a statement, if you make an instruction or command, there's no big deal about it, right? You have to really try to be rude in Toki Pona. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something cool. Have a good one.